After months and months of posturing and media reports about Ben Simmons and the Philadelphia 76ers, the inevitable has finally happened. Ben Simmons is heading to Brooklyn alongside Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, and 2 first-round picks in exchange for James Harden and Paul Millsap. Now, I'm going to get into the meat of this trade and talk about what it means for both teams, but I just want to say that I'm so happy that I never have to hear another report about Ben Simmons in Philly ever again. The back and forth between them over the past 6 months has gotten really old, so I'm just really glad that it's over. But in this video, we're going to talk about how this helps, hurts, and impacts these two teams going forward, not just this year, but years down the road. As always, be sure to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoy the video. Let's jump right into it. So I'm going to start off talking about Philly, first about what they gave up, and second about what they got back. Now, obviously, they gave up Ben Simmons. I don't think I need to go into a crazy amount of detail on what Ben Simmons both did and didn't bring to the table for them. I think we all know at this point. But they did send out Seth Curry, which I do think could have some implications on them going forward. But if you think about it, they're essentially replacing Seth Curry with James Harden. So it more or less negates what you lost in Curry in the first place. But as far as depth goes, it is a loss to consider. They also sent out Andre Drummond, who, for all the criticisms that he's rightfully received over the years, has been a fairly quality backup big man for them. To be completely honest though, his production can more or less be replicated by another backup big acquired through either the buyout market or free agency, so I wouldn't consider this too massive of a loss if you're a 76ers fan. In the grand scheme of things, the 76ers really only gave up 2 players for James Harden. Ben Simmons wasn't even playing in the first place, so from a purely cost analysis perspective, Seth Curry and Andre Drummond plus their picks for James Harden, that's a pretty good deal to me. Now, let's talk about the picks really quick because I've seen some confusion. Now, they gave up a 2022 unprotected first-round pick and a 2027 protected first-round pick. Their pick this year isn't going to be too valuable, assuming they make the playoffs, which I really think they will. And the 2027 first-round pick is protected 1 through 8. So if things for some reason do go south in Philadelphia and they're in a lottery position in 2027, they still have a good chance of retaining it if it lands in the top 1 through 8. So all of this resulted in them getting James Harden. Now, the amount of offensive load this is going to take off of Joel Embiid's shoulders is going to be massive. Embiid has been a great defender this year, but I think this level of offense being taken off of his plate is going to result in an uptick in defensive production simply because he isn't going to have to save himself for the offensive end anymore. One thing I'm really interested to see though is the playmaking dynamic between the two. We all know that James Harden is a great passer, one of the best passers in the NBA, but Joel Embiid has also developed into a really competent playmaker as well. He's not really the most active of screeners in the world, and Harden is really used to playing with rim-running bigs in the pick-and-roll setting screens. There's gonna be a bit of an adjustment period. These are 2 players whose styles are not immediately going to mesh with one another, but once they find a good balance between each other's strengths, it is gonna be really fun to see them play off of each other. James Harden also shores up the rotation a bit. Tyrese Maxey is a great guard, and to me, he's definitely a future all-star, but the 76ers were in desperate need of someone who can distribute the ball and command the offense at a high level. Obviously, James Harden is going to be capable of doing that just fine because he's been doing it for years. He's second in the league in assists per game right now with 10.2, and now you're throwing him next to the guy who's leading the league in scoring. There are some fit concerns, but once things get going and they've adjusted to each other, it's going to be a really scary duo. Now, let's pivot a little bit over to Brooklyn's side of things. They only gave up James Harden and Paul Millsap, and in exchange, they got Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, and those 2 first-round picks. If you rewind a bit to what they gave up to get James Harden in the first place, this trade really helps them recoup some of their losses from that trade, especially if you're operating under the assumption that James Harden was going to leave this offseason instead of letting him walk for nothing. You recoup some of those losses and set yourself up for the future. Now, for all of Ben Simmons' flaws, he is still a very good NBA player, and he's going to be able to provide a ton for this Brooklyn team. He's still one of the most versatile defenders in the NBA, he's still one of the best transition passers in the league, and he still possesses some level of scoring ability, particularly in the paint and around the rim. I've gotten a bit of backlash for this take, so I'm sure I'll hear about it in the comments if people disagree. But from a purely basketball perspective, is it crazy to think that Ben Simmons might fit better in Brooklyn than James Harden? Now, this is not me saying that he's better than James Harden by any means, but James Harden was a ball-dominant guard who needs the ball in his hands to operate and doesn't necessarily bring a ton of versatility on defense. Ben Simmons is a point forward who has some positional versatility on the offensive end. There's an endless amount of lineup possibilities in terms of positions for Brooklyn. Simmons can now just focus on deferring to KD and Kyrie and playing defense. A backcourt of Harden and Kyrie is almost redundant. Harden is a better playmaker than Kyrie, don't get me wrong, but they both almost mitigate each other's offensive strengths. You're not getting the most out of either of them when they're having to account and defer to one another, and that doesn't even address when Kevin Durant is in the lineup as well, because that's just another mouth to feed. They also acquired Seth Curry, who is just a perfect player to have flanking Kyrie and KD. They can kick out to him. He's a really efficient three-point shooter, probably one of the best in the league at 40% on 5 attempts per game. He's also one of the best mid-range shooters in the entire league. A lot of people don't know that. He's shooting 54% from the mid-range on almost 4 attempts per game. The only players in the NBA shooting 50% or higher on 3.5 or more mid-range attempts per game are LaMarcus Aldridge, Kevin Durant, Trae Young, Chris Paul, and Seth Curry. The Nets get yet again another mid-range sniper that can cause problems for defenses. With uncertainty surrounding Joe Harris's return and with a relative lack of depth, getting Seth Curry helps them out a lot. They got Andre Drummond as well, and while Andre Drummond isn't exactly the best backup big in the NBA, I think he's going to be more than fine in a limited role, and it's going to help their depth a lot having him available to come in and play a role as long as he's bought in the way that he was in Philly. But for the Nets, considering the alternative to making this trade was potentially losing James Harden in the offseason for nothing, they did pretty well for themselves. I still think as long as KD comes back fully healthy and Kyrie either gets the jab or the mandates in New York are lifted, this team still has all the opportunity in the world to succeed at a high level. Ben Simmons is no longer going to have to operate as the second star. He can sink back and play third fiddle to Kyrie and KD and focus on playing Defensive Player of the Year level defense and facilitating on offense. I really like this fit a lot for him, and I think that considering everything over the last 12 months, this is probably the best case scenario for everybody involved. The question that everybody is asking is who won the trade? This realistically to me seems like a trade that could end up being a win-win for both sides. It was a difficult scenario to begin with, and both teams seemingly end up better and with more than they did before. Each of these teams' basketball needs were met. Philly got the star power that they wanted. Brooklyn recoups losses from the first Harden trade and adds another young star to the fold. I really do like this trade for both sides, and until we see what these guys look like on the court, it's far too early to say who won and lost this trade. So what did you guys think of this trade? Who do you think got better? Who do you think got worse? What was the most shocking trade from this trade deadline to you? Be sure to let me know in the comments below. As always, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and leave a like on the video because that's the #1 way to help me out with the YouTube algorithm and get this video recommended to more people. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.